Hello and welcome to Slide Into Sports live on 103.1 FM radio on WVLP. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, and what a Saturday and Friday it was for college football. It started off with South Florida just absolutely blowing the brakes off of North Texas 63-36. That game was it was back and forth in the first half, but then in the third quarter, South Florida puts on 28 points and had double the amount of points that North Texas had even put on the board. Their high-tempo offense was just able to rattle North Texas coming out of the locker room in the second half, apparently. But, yeah, and not only that, but Indiana gets its first top 5 AP ranked victory on the road against Oregon at Autzen Stadium with College game day there. The spotlights were on. It honestly really felt like it was going to be like the Ohio State game where, high pressure environment, everyone's there, like high expectations. And Indiana not only met the expectations, but they exceeded those expectations. I think a lot, at least based on from what people have been saying to me, is that they were expecting Indiana to lose by probably a touchdown. Like they were saying a touchdown, maybe 3 points, maybe a field goal. But no, that is not what happened at all. The defense looked absolutely dominant. The offense was extremely efficient. They were able to get the ball out quick. They were able to get it to who they needed to get it to. Mendoza looked great. I mean, he threw a pick, but that's okay. They were able to capitalize on it. Or it was a pick six. So Oregon was able to score off of that. But then the offense rallied, scored again, and wow. I mean, it honestly, just as an IU alum, it does not feel real, if I'm being completely honest, because for 3 of my 4 years of being at Indiana University, I went through the Tom Allen era where we had a combined 9 wins in 3 seasons when I was there. And when Cignetti came along last year, he got us to 11 wins for the first time in school history and got more wins than Tom Allen was able to get in the 3 years that I was on campus. It's crazy. It's crazy, and it's so special. It's so special. But, I mean, that's not the only thing that happened this weekend, at least game-wise. There was also Alabama versus Missouri. That was an amazing game, right on down to the wire. I mean, Missouri, even though Missouri, I mean, you could argue that they weren't really tested, they put up a great fight. Their home stadium, even though, a portion of it's under construction, that stadium was rocking. That home environment it's up there. It's kind of like Autzen Stadium, where it's a little bit underrated, but it's loud, when you're there. Texas A&M also blows out Florida 34-17. Georgia escapes Auburn 20-10, and I only say escapes because this is Auburn, so there was some questionable officiating going on, and we'll get to that later. But you would expect Georgia to win by more. I expected Auburn to win this game, but my gut also told me that Jackson Arnold struggles running with the ball. So we're gonna. All Georgia had to do really was defend the run because Jackson Arnold is not great at throwing the ball. LSU beats South Carolina by 10 at home. Texas Tech blows out Kansas 42-17. Tennessee escapes Arkansas 34-31. I don't know what it is with Tennessee and Arkansas, but Tennessee always plays weird when they play Arkansas. It doesn't make any sense to me, but oh well. Michigan gets absolutely destroyed by USC by 31-13, and for my Notre Dame fans out there, I mean, this is great for you guys because SC is now ranked. So, I mean, all the questions of whether or not you guys were going to get a ranked win to propel yourselves into the playoff contention, I mean, getting a ranked win, that is crucial. And right now, you have 2 ranked losses, but no ranked wins. But with USC becoming ranked now, this is your guys' opportunity. So this is a win or get in moment for Notre Dame. They have to beat Southern California, and that is not going to be an easy game, mind you. That Southern California offense is elite. Like, that offense is really good. Notre Dame's offense is going to have to keep up with that Southern California offense if they're going to want to have any kind of shot, or Notre Dame defense is going to have to step up. Utah blows out Arizona State 42-10, and that, I mean, I kind of felt like that. I knew that was going to happen because Sam Leavitt wasn't playing their starting quarterback. He was on the road at Utah. Utah is also kind of desperate right now. I mean, they have 1 loss in the Big 12 to Texas Tech. Right now, they're on the road to try and get into that Big 12 championship game to probably face off against Texas Tech, because right now it's really looking like Texas Tech is going to be in the Big 12 championship. I mean, they look really good. Their schedule is favorable from this point out. So expect Texas Tech in that Big 12 championship. Utah, the way they looked against Arizona State, you're probably going to see them there as well. So that'll be a rematch too between Texas Tech and Utah. And Texas Tech destroyed them. So Utah is going to be out for blood in that game, assuming that it happens. UCLA beat Michigan State 38-13, proving that the game against Penn State was no fluke. It was not a fluke. UCLA seems like they figured it out. They're looking like a tougher opponent. I mean, they're probably not going to be ranked because they have 4 losses, but they're going to spoil some teams' seasons in the Big Ten. And that's the truth. I mean, honestly, UCLA, the way they've been playing, they probably could beat USC and spoil their season at the end of November and eliminate USC from playoff contention, assuming that USC beats Notre Dame, of course. They have to get past Notre Dame first. But UCLA, they've got the opportunity to just basically be the grenade of the Big Ten. I mean, it's right there for them. They are absolutely able to do that. Nebraska goes on the road and beats Maryland 34-31, and that was a crazy game too, because Nebraska, they would go. It was kind of like the Georgia-Tennessee game earlier this year, where Georgia would be down by like 3 scores and then fight their way back, and then Tennessee would go back up by 2 scores, and then Georgia would fight their way back, and then Tennessee goes up 10 points. Georgia fights their way back, takes it to overtime, and wins. This game didn't go to overtime, but Nebraska had to fight their way back multiple times in this game. And Maryland showing that they've got a young team, but they've got a pretty solid team. And I think it may not be their year this year, but they're going to have a very solid team, even more solid team, really, next year and the following year with their freshman quarterback at the helm. And finally, I think this is probably the biggest news out of the entire college football weekend, or the craziest news, maybe not even like, anyway, the Northwestern goes on the road to Penn State and beats them 22-21. I don't know what it is with Penn State this year, and it seems like they've addressed the problem, which we'll get to that in a second. But Penn State, they're just in a really, really rough place. I mean, they went from being the number 2 ranked team in the country, probably a national championship favorite for some people, or even like on most people's predictions in the matchup, like in the championship game, to now being 3-3, still without a Power 4 win. I think they are now like, it was really between Penn State and Texas for the Power 4 win. Texas got it against Oklahoma. They blew Oklahoma out like 23-6. It was nuts. Like Arch, look, he was starting to figure it out, and it looks like he's got his confidence back. So, I mean, we'll see next week when Texas plays in their next game. I don't remember exactly who they play off the top of my head right now, and I will find that information. But when Texas plays their next game, we need to see whether or not this is going to be a one-time thing. Did Arch perform the way he did because it was a rivalry game, or is he finally found himself? Has he finally found himself in the college football scene? And Texas goes to Kentucky this weekend. So I think this one will definitely be an interesting one. Stoops is a very defensive-minded coach, but Kentucky has been pretty mediocre at best this year. I mean, they're right now the worst team in the SEC. Them and Mississippi State, who Texas plays next. I mean, Mississippi State is still good. Don't get me wrong. They're a great team this year. They've improved a lot, but I think they still have a little bit of a ways to go. I mean, they're at least beating teams like Arizona State, which is something. Anyway, that's a brief recap of the games that happened this past weekend. The AP poll. So let's look at this AP poll here real quick, okay? Now, normally I wouldn't really look too closely at the AP poll, but I don't have a guest this week. So it's just me, which means there's a little bit more time to look at the AP poll, or at least, on here. And I think the AP pretty much got it right. I mean, you could argue for some teams to be higher and some teams to be lower. Like, some people have had Cincinnati in their top 25 for a while. Same thing with Nebraska, but they're not, they're only at 24 and 25 here on this AP poll. I will say, they 100% got the top three correct. That's the main thing. And this is the thing I was looking at. Because my fear was that Indiana was going to be just put at 5 because they beat Oregon, even though Oregon was number 3 in the country and they've looked really good against everyone. But the reason why I was thinking that Indiana was going to get put down at like 5 or 6 was because when Indiana just not even beat, but destroyed Illinois, spanked them, they went to 11th. Like, they didn't even get into the top 10, even though they beat a top 10 team. So I was thinking, okay, the AP is probably going to screw Indiana over again. But no, the AP actually put Indiana right at 3rd, which I think that is exactly where Indiana should be right now. Because you've got Ohio State at 1, national champions from last year. They've just been absolutely dominating everyone that they've played. It's like they should be number 1 right now, okay? Texas is now ranked again, so Ohio State now has a ranked one again. So good on Ohio State. Miami is number 2. They have 2 ranked wins right now. And it's only 2 because Florida State got booted out. They're not in the top 25 anymore. So that knocks off a ranked win for Miami. But they should still be at 2, in my opinion, with the way they've looked. Indiana at 3. On the road to Oregon, 30-20, first top 5 road win in school history, should be at 3. Like, it, at least 3, like 3 minimum. Indiana actually got 3 votes to be the number 1 team. And I think this might be the first time in the school's history that happened as well. Miami got 13 votes to be the number 1 team, and Ohio State got 50 votes to be the number 1 team. Indiana was actually really close to being number 2. They were within 50 points, or they were like right on the line of 50 points within Miami. Miami was at 1,582, and Indiana was at 1,531. So real close there. Then at number 4, you've got Texas A&M And last week, Ole Miss was at number 4. But the reason why I think the committee moved Texas A&M up is because Texas A&M had an impressive win against Florida, while Ole Miss barely squeaked by Washington State. They were favored by 33.5 points and won by 3. So, yeah, Ole Miss moving down was completely justified, even though they're 6-0. Texas A&M beating Florida 34-17, who had just beaten the Texas team at home the week before. Only makes sense. It only makes sense. Number 6 is Alabama, and I think you could argue for Texas Tech to go above Alabama. Obviously, Texas Tech is 6-0, but Alabama did get that road win against Missouri after getting a road win against Georgia. Like that, I mean, it's pretty impressive to get 2 road wins against ranked teams. Granted, I think Georgia is very overrated or very overhyped at the very least, but still, a win is a win. You can't punish a team for winning, and if teams above you lose, then, you move up if you win. Texas Tech's at 7. They thrashed Kansas 42-17. I don't think the committee is all too impressed with the Big 12 this year, but I think there's definitely some sneaky teams in the Big 12 that could maybe make noise, at least ones that are not named Texas Tech, because we know Texas Tech is going to make noise this year. They are built like a team to make noise, especially on the lines of scrimmage. Oregon moves down to 8, so essentially Oregon and Indiana switch places from last week, which I think is the right call. I don't think you punish Oregon too hard for losing to a top 10 team. I mean, when I do my rankings personally, I try not to punish teams for losing to teams that are close to them, within 5 spots of them, at least in the top 10, because that's not really fair in my opinion. Georgia's at 9, and I mean, I said earlier that Georgia was overrated, but at the same time, you look at the teams below them, which is LSU at 10, Tennessee at 11, Georgia Tech at 12, Notre Dame at 13, and Oklahoma at 14. You look at it and you think, okay, Oklahoma lost to an unranked team, and they have the same record as Georgia. So they're going to move down below Georgia probably. I mean, in my mind, they would move down below Georgia. Notre Dame's at 2 losses. Their 2 losses are against top 10 opponents. But because they were down really far, they're not going to move up too much further because the team they beat was North Carolina State. They beat USC, I could see them jumping up possibly into the top 10. Georgia Tech at 12. They beat Virginia Tech 35-20. I don't think the committee likes the ACC as much as the Big 12, but Georgia Tech, I think, is deserving to be ranked above a couple of these other teams. I think they deserve to be ranked above Tennessee and LSU, because Tennessee is kind of like the reverse LSU, where Tennessee has a really great offense, but their defense is atrocious. Their defense is non-existent. And then you've got LSU, who has a really great defense. They have an elite defense, but at the same time, they don't have an offense. They don't have a functioning offense. So, you look at the score, LSU has been kind of getting away with wins simply because of their defense. Does that mean they should be punished? Not necessarily, no. But when you look at it versus some of these teams up top, I don't think that they'd really be able to compete unless they figure out their offense. I mean, if LSU figures out their offense, then they should be in the top 5. But they haven't been able to figure out their offense. Nussmeier is not 100%. So those teams being below Georgia, I get it. But at the same time, I feel like Georgia is kind of on that level, even though they're within the top 10. I feel like right now the tiers are kind of separated at, instead of top 10, it's top 8, and then there's a pretty significant gap in my mind between 8 and 9, and then there's another gap between 22 and 25. Like, yeah, it's just not. It's weird. It's more competitive, but at the same time, it's, I don't know. There's just a lot more teams that you don't typically see in the top 25 that are in the top 25 that are also doing well in the top 25. And you've got other teams that are typically in the top 25 or were in the top 25 in the preseason and kind of have that bias because of how they are on paper in the preseason. And the committee is kind of banking on these teams figuring it out at some point in the year, which I don't necessarily think is fair, but that's how the system is right now. BYU's at 15th. I kind of like the respect that BYU got for the road win against Arizona. I mean, Arizona is a tough team and a tough place to play in the Big 12. Arizona has a great run game. I know Arizona's record doesn't really show how good they are, but they've got a really great ground game. But because they lost McMillan to the draft from last year, they don't have as much of a air game. They can't really stretch the field as much this year. So they still have Fafita, but I mean, when you're a good quarterback, you also need weapons. You need people to throw to. Football's a team sport. So Missouri's at 16. I like that they only moved down 2 spots after losing to Alabama by 3. Missouri did technically cover because the spread was 3.5. So good on Missouri. Vanderbilt's at 17. They move up a couple. They didn't even play, but they moved up 3 because there was so much chaos in that part of the bracket that they just get a mosey on up, I guess. Same thing with Virginia. Virginia's at 18. They had a bye. They move up a spot. South Florida moves up 5 spots into 19, which is where I had them ranked last week, which is where they should have been ranked in the first place. They clobbered North Texas, just like I said earlier, but they clobbered North Texas 63-36. USC is ranked 20th after they just throttled Michigan, but I think 20 is a deserving spot right now for USC with 1 loss. Texas jumps back into the rankings at 21 after their win against Oklahoma. And this is the one of the things that kind of confuses me with the AP poll, at least with this week, is with the head-to-head. And I mean, this has been kind of a thing for me this whole year, is with this head-to-head, like when Virginia first entered the rankings after beating Florida State. Florida State was still above them. And this is like the exact same thing that's happening, where Texas enters the rankings, but Oklahoma is above them, even though that's the team they beat. So it's making me question whether or not the AP actually respects head-to-head. If that, because they say in their criteria that they are supposed to respect head-to-head. It doesn't look like they're doing that. I think they respected the head-to-head when they bumped Texas out of the rankings, when they kept Florida out of the rankings. But here, it's Florida State and Virginia all over again. We'll see whether or not Texas is able to keep their momentum going after this Red River rivalry. But, again, if Texas is at 21, then Oklahoma probably should be down at 22. Just, it makes sense. At 22 is Memphis. They move up a spot after not playing because teams above them lost and got booted out of the rankings. Utah jumps into 23 after being unranked. Talked about that game, 42-10 against Arizona State. Cincinnati jumps in at 24 after beating UCF by 9, and I'm not really sure why they're above Nebraska because Nebraska beat them. It was at a neutral site, so, well, kind of, but because it was at Arrowhead, and that's pretty close to Lincoln, Nebraska. So there's going to be a lot of Nebraska fans out there. Pretty far from Cincinnati, so neutral site is questionable, but they still beat them, and that should be respected. And that puts Nebraska at 25. Other teams that received votes this week: Illinois, Michigan, Washington, UNLV, Navy, Mississippi State, Tulane, and San Diego State. Illinois got the most of those votes at 113, and Michigan got 73. And then there was a pretty significant gap after that. Okay, so now let's go into this other news with the coaches. So as we know, this year started off pretty fiery when it came to coach firings, with UCLA firing their coach Deshaun Foster on September 14th, followed by the firing of Brent Pry, also on September 14th, both with atrocious starts to their seasons. Sam Pittman was then fired the next week, September 25th, after a abysmal game against Notre Dame, where Notre Dame blew them out 56-13 at home. And now, and there's also Mike Gundy. And this was his 21st season at Oklahoma State, too, which made this firing all the more kind of crazy. But after the 1-2 start this season and going 3-9 in 2024, after losing the game to Tulsa, he was let go. And now, joining the list too, UAB firing Trent Dilfer after a 2-4 start of the 2025 season. This is his third season as the coach of the Blazers. And then also on October 12th, and this is probably the one that at this point most of you have heard, but James Franklin gets fired from Penn State after their third loss in a row. The Nittany Lions were 104-45 in 11-plus seasons under Franklin, but he has the same amount of AP top 10 wins as Curt Cignetti, who has only been in the Big Ten for a year and a half. Now, I kind of want to go into why I think this firing is good and why I think this firing is bad, because it can be both. It can be both. Everything has positives and negatives. The positives for Penn State here. One, the fans. Now, from the clips that I saw online, the fans were wearing paper bags over their heads when Penn State was playing against Northwestern. Now, it's hard enough playing on the road, right? It's hard enough going away. Like UCLA, he went on the road. Went across 4 time zones. That's hard to do. It's hard to do that. Granted, it was against 0-4 UCLA, but still, the preparation is going to be dramatically different. But when your fans are at home putting paper bags over their heads and actively rooting against you, it's going to make it, honestly, that is harder to me than a road environment. When you're in an environment that is supposed to be positive for you and is supposed to serve as a benefit to you and your team, and it's not, and it's serving as the exact opposite, then it's going to bite you in the butt. It's going to make winning in your home stadium that much harder. It's going to feel more like a road game than a home game. And, they were booing. The booing started this season really when against Oregon, when they were down 18-3. I believe it was at the end of the third quarter when they were down 18-3. And the Penn State fans were booing the offense off the field. And, people have been calling for James Franklin's head for a while now. But the fans have been pressing more and more and more at the games, online. Fire Franklin chants ringing throughout the stadium. It makes it really hard to keep the locker room, to keep the players, and also to keep the coach. Listening to the post-game press conference after the Northwestern game, it looked like James Franklin didn't even want to be there anymore. If I'm being real. It did not look like he wanted to be there at all. He was asked point blank whether or not he still wanted to coach at Penn State, and he did not give a yes or no answer. He gave a yappy answer where he's just talking around the question, which made me think that he didn't even want to be there anymore. And my guess is that he probably was going to make an announcement at the end of the season saying that he was going to leave. And that and he was going to allow someone else to kind of take over. and maybe thank the fans for, like, rallying behind him back in the early days when he was rebuilding the program like 11 and a half years ago. But instead, he gets fired. And here's where I get into the bad. Because that was a good thing. It's going to get the fans, it's going to reassure the fans that the athletic department cares and that they're taking steps into making the football team better. The bad is that recruits and the transfer portal are going to be firing for Penn State. People are going to be fleeing there in droves. They're not going to want to stay. The recruits, they came for Franklin. He's the one that recruited them. One of the things about Franklin is that he's a great recruiter. He knows how to recruit talent. Developing, questionable, but recruiting, definitely positive. So now you're going to have a lot of top-end talent decommitting from Penn State. You're going to see people leaving through the transfer portal soon. There's a new rule on the transfer portal where players have to wait 5 days. They shortened the transfer portal window from a month to 15 days, but that 15-day window doesn't start until 5 days after the coach's firing is announced to the public. So in about 3-4 days, you're in. Sooner than that, in a 15-day span, you're going to be seeing players hitting the portal. You're going to be seeing recruits decommit from Penn State. Because now they haven't, they're going to need to announce who their head coach is going to be so that way he can start recruiting. And the longer Penn State takes to do that, the more recruits, the harder it's going to be to recruit, the harder it is, the less time you have to, find players in the transfer portal. So, it puts Penn State in a very difficult situation, at least for the short term. Short term, I think this is really going to hurt. Next year, it's probably going to hurt unless they find a guy like Signetti. But just looking at the market, it's going to be tough. It is going to be tough. I'm very curious to see which direction Penn State goes with their coaching hire. But right now, the assistant coach of James Franklin is the interim head coach. So he will be taking the reins from here, at least for the rest of the season. But one of the things we are going to be keeping an eye out is the announcement for who is going to be taking over the head coaching position at Penn State. And it is going to be a very interesting thing. People are going to be following that for a while. I've already seen people speculating that Matt Rule is going to be going for the Penn State job because Matt Rule, he's at Nebraska and he has a pretty good situation over there, but his alma mater is Penn State. He played at Penn State. He has said in the past that he wants to coach at Penn State. So his name is being brought up a lot. So keep an eye on Matt Rule in pregame and postgame press conferences because reporters are going to be asking him whether or not he is going to make the move from Nebraska to Penn State. Because this Penn State job, if you do a good enough job at it, it's a job that comes around every 10 years or so, maybe longer. Look at the Iowa coach. He's been there for 20 plus years. So, Penn State head coaching job is kind of like that, where it comes around in what feels like once in a blue moon. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this head coaching job for Penn State. It's also going to be interesting to see how that team performs after losing Drew Aller as well, because Drew Aller suffered a season-ending injury. The injury hasn't been announced yet, but one of his cleats was taken off when he was in the cart. So maybe a foot injury, maybe a leg injury. We'll find out soon for that. All right, before we get into these Week 8 games, before we preview them and talk about the outcomes of those, I have a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. All right, so week 7 kind of that started off with football very early in the week. Week 8 is no different, and from here on out, we're going to be seeing football games earlier in the week. There's 3 Tuesday games, there's 2 Wednesday games, 1 Thursday game, 4 Friday games, and the typical 20 games on Saturday or so. I mean, it's probably more than 20, but you know what I mean. Feels like more than that. The first big game, or the first big games, I really should say, because there's actually quite a few big games here on Friday. First one is Louisville versus Miami. This one, I think, will prove to be very interesting because Miami, obviously, number 2 ranked team in the country. They're undefeated. Louisville, they're 4-1. Their only loss right now is to Virginia, who is ranked. They played that game very close. And Louisville, I mean, they picked up Miller Moss from the transfer portal, and he's a pretty good quarterback as well. Louisville played a great game against Pitt on the road 2 weeks ago. They're no slouch. Louisville is not a slouch. However, I think with this Louisville game, the question is whether or not, because at the beginning of that Penn State game, when they were not the Penn State game, the Pitt game, excuse me, my bad. The beginning of the Pitt game, Louisville, they turned the ball over relatively frequently and weren't really playing too well. They had to kind of fight their way back in that game. And this game, it's on the road. It's at Hard Rock Stadium for Louisville. So I'm wondering whether or not that will serve to be a problem for Louisville, especially against a Miami team that comes out swinging. They come out really hot. Really, really hot. They love to go for the jugular right at the beginning of the game. They don't really finish games. That's kind of my issue with Miami right now. They struggle to close out games, but they still win. So, is Miami's lead in the beginning of this game against Louisville going to be enough to shut them down and keep them from coming back? Or is Louisville going to be able to keep themselves in this game, keep it close, and maybe win? I think if Louisville keeps it close, I think they could maybe win. I really do. And that would really shake things up for the ACC because right now there's 3 undefeated teams in the ACC, at least in conference. You've got Miami, you've got Virginia, and Virginia is only undefeated in ACC conference play because the game they played against North Carolina State was not an in-conference game. It was not scheduled as an in-conference game, so it doesn't count as an in-conference game. And Georgia Tech is the other one. So if Miami loses and Virginia and Georgia Tech don't slip up the rest of the year, that could be our ACC championship game. So Miami needs to make sure they have their heads on straight going up against Louisville. Because Louisville is not an easy team. They are not an easy team. They're not a top 25 ranked team. They are fringe top 25 team. The only reason I think they didn't really get any votes is because I believe they had a bye last week. I don't think they played last week. So, and I mean, it's hard to get votes when you don't play. It is. Last time they played was against Virginia. They didn't play last week. So, Louisville, watch out for them. They could upset Miami here if they keep it close. All right, next big game. Minnesota versus Nebraska. And I think this one could be a sneaky Minnesota coming off of a pretty great win against Purdue. At least the way they won it was pretty incredible. They're going up against Nebraska. And this is at Minnesota. This is a road game. Nebraska, they're coming off of a tough game against Maryland. Will Minnesota be able to get the best of them? Minnesota, they have a great player in the secondary. Great player in the secondary. He's a defensive back. It's Coy Parrish. Freshman, really, really good. He's supposed to be the next Travis Hunter in like a couple years because he's still young. But he is a really talented player. He gave Minnesota the win last week against Purdue with the pick six. He could make a game-changing play against Nebraska, who has a pass-heavy offense. So he'll be back there waiting for Dylan Raiola to make a mistake on a throw. Pick him off. Force him to turn the ball over. Apply pressure on those wide receivers and on Raiola. So I think Minnesota's got a shot. I don't think they win because I think they overall have a very young team this year. They have a redshirt sophomore as their quarterback, so he's going to be there for a couple more years as well. So Minnesota, there's a decent amount of teams in the Big Ten that are young, they're good, but Nebraska, they have an experienced roster. They've got great coaching. I'm very confident that Nebraska will win. But Minnesota has a shot because it's on the road, or because it's at home for them. So I think Minnesota could shake things up. They could maybe shake things up, but I doubt it. Nebraska wants to be in the playoffs this year, and they need to win against Minnesota in order to do that. So I don't think they're going to let this one up. All right, and the last game that I think will be at least interesting, or at least on Friday, that will be interesting is Cal versus North Carolina. Now, Cal is where Fernando Mendoza used to play quarterback. He was good, and he was good there. And Cal, after Fernando left, Cal had to find a new quarterback, and they found their guy. He's good. He is really good. He's young, but he's really good. The rest of the Cal roster is also very, very talented. UNC, it seems like they're kind of tapped out. Just watching them play, watching Belichick on the sidelines, it seems like they're checked out. And they're 0-1 right now in conference play. Granted, they played Clemson, but still, they're 0-1 in conference play, which is not good. They're 2-3 overall, while Cal is 1-1 in conference play, and they're 4-2 overall. One of those losses was against San Diego State, but San Diego State has a great defense, and they were able to lock Cal's offense down. The other loss that Cal had was against Duke, and Duke is one of the top teams in the ACC this year. Maybe not like top, but like A tier top. Not S tier, but A tier. And this game, I think their quarterback is named Jaron Kewe Sagopoletele. I totally butchered his name, and I am super sorry about that. But he's really good. He looks really good. And the thing with the Cal quarterbacks, if there's anything we've learned from Mendoza, is that they have very high IQ. They're very high IQ players. And and he sat behind Mendoza for a year. Jaron sat behind Mendoza for a year. So he's going to know the ropes of that offense already. I'm pretty confident that Cal is going to beat North Carolina in this game. I have no doubt there. All right, so starting off on Saturday, we've got Ohio State versus Wisconsin. Ohio State should blow out Wisconsin. Doesn't matter if it's at home, doesn't matter if it's on the road. They're going to blow out Wisconsin. Wisconsin is really bad this year. They're really bad. Oregon versus Rutgers. Again, this is a game where it doesn't necessarily matter where it is, but after Penn State lost to Oregon in a double overtime game, they fell apart. Is Oregon going to fall apart after losing to Indiana? I don't think so. Dan Lanning is one of the best coaches in college football. I don't think he's going to let his team fall apart after losing to Indiana. If anything, I think he's going to have his team just inflict absolute punishment against this Rutgers team and treat Rutgers like a punching bag. So I think Oregon will win that game, hands down. Ole Miss versus Georgia. Now, this game, I'm very intrigued by because Ole Miss played a weirdly close game against Washington State. And Washington State is one of the worst teams in college football right now. But Georgia was next week. It's at Sanford Stadium. The question here is, was Ole Miss looking too far ahead? Were they thinking about Georgia in that game against Washington State? Or is Ole Miss fraudulent? Are they a pretender and not a contender? We'll find out. We will find out Saturday, October 18th, 2:30 p.m. Central Time. We'll all find out together. I think Ole Miss is more legit than people are probably giving them credit for, especially going up against Georgia. I think Georgia is very fraudulent. Very, very, very fraudulent. And I know this is at Sanford Stadium. I know Kirby Smart's probably going to want to get his mojo back at Sanford Stadium, restart the streak. But hopefully when Kirby Smart plays Ole Miss, he's not clapping in the form of a timeout, because that's what he did against Ole Miss. And I said I was going to get to this later, and I'm going to kind of rant about this, but the Georgia Ole Miss game, the reason why I say that Georgia barely escaped that game was because it was a very key moment in the game. I think it was 3rd and long, and Kirby is running down the sidelines and he's calling timeout. Right? He's calling timeout. He's putting his hands in the motion. You can see the way his lips move that he is yelling timeout. The refs call the timeout. And then Kirby starts throwing a fit on the sideline saying that he didn't call a timeout. And then all of a sudden, even after they looked at the footage, they gave the timeout back to Georgia, and they let Georgia and their offense have a replay. Tell me the game isn't rigged without telling me the game isn't rigged. At least that's what I'd be saying if I was an Auburn fan. But it's things like that that make me question, if that didn't happen, would the outcome have been different? Would Auburn have been able to stop Georgia on that play? Would they have been able to put Georgia in a more difficult position? Probably. The Auburn defense is really good. I wouldn't be surprised if the outcome would have been different. But that's the past. And I'm sure Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, because Lane Kiffin and Kirby both are from the Nick Saban coaching tree, they are going to be familiar with the antics that each of them have. I don't really know any of Lane Kiffin's antics, but we found out one of Kirby's antics now, didn't we? All right, so next game, Texas A&M, Arkansas. Texas A&M is going to beat them, hands down. I'm not even going to put another second of thought into that game. That's how confident I am in Texas A&M. Oklahoma, South Carolina. I think I'm a little scared for Oklahoma. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little scared for them because the way they performed in that game against Texas, clearly Mateer was not 100%. He was not 100% in that game. And now they're going up against a desperate South Carolina team that at this point, because they have 3 losses already, so they're probably not making the playoff. But that doesn't mean South Carolina can't spoil going to the playoffs for other teams. Maybe Oklahoma's that team. Maybe South Carolina gives Oklahoma their second loss. I mean, you look at the game, and it's in it's in South Carolina. South Carolina does have a pretty electric home environment. So we could see some spoiling going on between South Carolina and Oklahoma. South Carolina could get the win there. Granted, Oklahoma is probably going to be looking for revenge somehow, but I don't know. I mean, this is a pretty good situation for South Carolina, because if Mateer is still not 100%, South Carolina could take advantage of that. They could very well take advantage of that, especially at least on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, South Carolina has been, they've been okay. I mean, they have Lenora Sellers, but he doesn't really have too much help. So, yeah, they're going to need to look within themselves and find something in order to beat Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma probably wins, but South Carolina does have an opportunity to spoil Oklahoma's season, because Oklahoma, after South Carolina, Oklahoma does not have an easy road. They play Bama later this year, and that could be Oklahoma's third loss if South Carolina beats them. Then there's Indiana, Michigan State. Indiana's beating them. That's it. I have nothing more to say about that. Then there's Tennessee, Alabama. This one I think is interesting, because you've got a team like Tennessee, who's a very high-powered offense, but very lackluster defense, and you've got Alabama, who they're pretty balanced on both sides of the ball. I'd say they're definitely stronger on the offensive side of the ball than the defensive side of the ball. They struggle against the run a little bit. I mean, they've looked better than when they played against Florida State. But we all saw in the Missouri game, like, there was times where Missouri was able to get those big runs. However, I think Alabama's red zone defense has improved, and that is why Missouri struggled to score more points against Alabama. And I think that is going to be what gives Tennessee their next loss. This game, Tennessee, Alabama, it's a big rivalry. Tennessee beat Alabama last year, but that was at Neyland Stadium. This year, it's at Bryant-Denny. And I think maybe this Tennessee team can rally. Maybe. Possible. I don't think it's likely, though. I don't trust their defense. And right now, the way Alabama's been playing, I think Alabama probably gets them. I mean, don't get me wrong. It'll be a close game. Tennessee's offense will force it to be a close game. I don't think they're going to win, though. I think Tennessee loses by 3 or 4 points in that game. Then there's Texas Tech, Arizona State. I think, assuming that Sam Leavitt is not playing in that game, Texas Tech is going to slaughter them. With Sam Leavitt in that game, I think Arizona State loses by a touchdown in that game. Either way, Texas Tech is winning that game. I think right now, just top to bottom, they have the better roster, besides quarterback and maybe wide receiver. But I really like Texas Tech's roster this year in the Big 12. So I would say Texas Tech wins that game. Then there's LSU Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt gets them. I do. I think Vanderbilt is better on both sides of the ball, at least balance-wise. I think Vandy is a more balanced team than LSU. If LSU somehow, by some miracle, figures out their offense in that game, then I think LSU wins. But I think Vanderbilt, being where they're ranked, I feel like Vanderbilt is a very underrated team. I understand why they're ranked where they're ranked at 17th. There's definitely an argument to be made that they could be higher. If Diego Pavia actually played his best, would he have beaten Bama? Would Vandy be undefeated? Would Vandy be a top 10 team if they won? We'll never know. But they do have an opportunity to beat number 11 ranked LSU. And I like Vanderbilt's odds in this game. I do. Because they can run the ball and they can pass the ball. They're definitely better at running the ball. But Pavia can sling the ball if he has to. LSU, Vanderbilt's offense, all they have to do is just get to whoever's the quarterback, whether it's Nussmeier or not Meyer, then, it doesn't matter. They're going to, they're not going to make the correct decision. They're going to be forced into a bad decision if you get to the quarterback soon enough. Then there's Georgia Tech Duke. Duke could spoil Georgia Tech's season here. They really could. Duke is one of they're ranked third right now in the ACC. They have 3 ACC wins. The only reason why they're ranked third is because Miami only has 1 ACC win. But still, 3-0 in the ACC, 4-2 overall. One of their losses is to Illinois. This could be a sneaky game for Georgia Tech. And, it's at Duke, too. This could be a trap game for Georgia Tech, a true trap game, because we saw what happened when they played Wake Forest. It did not end very well. Some people are arguing that Georgia Tech should have lost that game. Could have ended really badly for Georgia Tech. I think Duke, they have a shot. They have the talent to do it. I don't think they do it, though. I like the coaching, Georgia Tech. I like the experience on that roster. I think Georgia Tech will probably win. I think it'll be by 3 points, though. I don't think it's going to be by much. This Duke team could be very sneaky. They could be very sneaky. They're not a cakewalk. Then there's Missouri versus Auburn. I think Missouri should handle them pretty easily. Meets Auburn. But also, Auburn has had horrible luck with officiating lately. So I'm just going to take Missouri because I assume that Auburn's going to have the same luck. Then there's Washington versus Michigan. I think Michigan is going to... Well, I don't know. Michigan wasn't able to handle SoCal's offense, and Washington has a pretty elite offense themselves. So I could see Washington sneaking up on Michigan here and giving them the third loss and keeping them out of the playoffs. So you know what? Give me Washington. I want to take Washington there. SoCal versus Notre Dame. This game might be the game of the weekend. It might be the game of the weekend. And this will be the last game that we're going to talk about as well. Because I think there's also the Holy War that's also going on. But I think that's going to be a pretty one-sided battle after watching both the Utah game and the BYU game last week. Man. It's in South Bend. I feel like Notre Dame will probably win. I think it'll be close, like a typical USC game. So I think Notre Dame wins. I think SoCal covers, but I think Notre Dame wins. All right, and that's all we have time for today. Tune in or see more content on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Patreon. I'm also pretty active on TikTok too. It's Slide Into Sports on TikTok. A lot of content there. If you missed previous broadcasts, you can always check back there. I do suggest looking at the Patreon though, because I do post rankings and my top 10 spreads there. And this week I was 6-4 on the spread, so wasn't too bad. The week before I was 5-5, so hopefully we do better. But see you all next week. Slide out.